welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for yet another amazing episode with today's extra special guest. Today we have the fabulous Joanna McIlveen. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Michele. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, thank you, Jo. It's just an absolute pleasure to have you come on the show today. And for those of you that may not be aware of Jo or have come across her in your work and travels, Jo is this incredible coordinator and counsellor in the grief and bereavement space. She's a social worker and health worker working in New South Wales Health and has been doing this for a number of years. And as a specialist in that area and in that space, we're so super excited to have you joining us today. So, Joanna, please, it's a speciality and an area for a social worker that I'm sure has got some amazing stories as to how you came to be working in it. Please, if you can share with people your background, how did you become a social worker? What's interested you in the grief and bereavement space?
Thank you, Michele. I think I grew up on the Kamilaroi lands in Tamworth, so I'm a country kid. And growing up, I was told explicitly by my mum and dad that I would be going to Sydney to go to university. And so I was, very compliant and was happy to do that. When I moved to Sydney after school, I started actually a Bachelor of Art Theory and going to the Paddington campus as a country kid was really fun, but also very eye-opening. And I quickly worked out within that year that there was probably not a great job opportunity at the end of that bachelor degree because there's only so many curators that it was needed. But I also got a sense that there was people in the degree that had a lot of expertise already, and I felt like a fish out of water. And so after that first year, I thought to myself, what is it I can do and what else do I love? And at school, I'd also really been passionate about society and culture and learning about humans. And so social work was a natural fit for me. And to be honest, I was a dreadful student. I was working lots. I was having a fun time. But I was able to get through the social work degree. And I did my final placement back in Tamworth at the Tamworth Hospital. And that was a really amazing opportunity. And I knew that there'd be further opportunities in that rural setting for employment, which was kind of a little bit strategic on my behalf. But I think the important thing related to why I chose social work was that I'd come from a family with very strong values around social justice, respect, compassion, empathy. My grandmother, who I spent a lot of time with, was an extraordinarily kind person. She was all about equity and fairness. My parents, again, very strong values around doing the right thing. My mum actually was one of the founders of the first women's refuge in Tamworth, which obviously instilled some fairly important values there. And also I spent a lot of time in one of the Tamworth youth centres where a whole diverse community of younger people would come. And so I had friends from all different backgrounds, and I was able to get a sense of disadvantage and injustice from a very early age. When I was doing my final placement in Tamworth, there was two very significant deaths that happened within our family. And, looking back, not knowing it at the time, but looking back, those two deaths of my grandmother and my brother-in-law significantly impacted on my path now. And I remember, as a family, we did not grieve well in either aspects. No one was role modeling how to grieve. And in your early 20s, in the early 2000s, grieving looks very different to as it does now. My cousins and I would go out drinking and, talk about things, and that was okay. But that was really the only way that we opened up about our experiences of grief. And so many years went on. I lived overseas in Munich for a couple of years, and then I came back to social work in Australia And I remember one specific incident where I was working as a ward social worker in an aged care ward. And it was early in the morning on the ward, and I was by the nurses' station. And this man came to me holding one of those large pink hospital bags. And he said to me, "Oh, I'm just collecting my mum's belongings. We didn't know she was going to die last night. No one had told us. Had anyone have told us, we would have stayed. We wouldn't have gone home." And he looked bereft. He was grey. His eyes were red. You know, he was obviously in shock. And I sat down with him. We talked. I apologised that no one had told him that that was happening. It was happening. The team knew it was happening. The ward knew it was happening, but no one had been brave enough to communicate that with him. And I remember after I'd spent time with him, provided him with the information around organising a funeral, etc., that I felt this overwhelming sense of anger. I just thought, what are we doing? This is not okay. That family missed an opportunity to say goodbye, to be there and to love their person, you know, in his case, his mum, because we weren't brave enough or courageous enough to tell them that it was happening, or that we didn't prioritise the impact of her death on their lives. And I was furious to a point where I was crying, and I went into my manager's office, and he's a remarkable person and still a very dear friend and mentor. And I, you know, kind of went, this is not good enough. We knew she was dying. How come the family didn't know? That is not okay. And he just sort of looked at me and said, "What are you going to do about it? What can you do about it?" And I was like, right, well, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to do a project. I'll learn how to do ethics, and I'll spend some time with families looking at the impact of poor deaths in hospitals on them in their bereavement, and also, you know, the larger impact on their family, thinking about, you know, what had happened in my family. And we did have opportunities to say goodbye and do all of that. So it was different in one sense, but our grief in many ways was very similar, very complex. And again, not knowing where to turn, not knowing what to do, set me on this path around learning how to do ethics. So I met with who is now my PhD supervisor, who sort of said to me, "Okay, I can show you how to do ethics, but what are you going to get from doing this bit of work? What do you want out of it?" And she talked to me about doing a master's or a PhD. And my husband being an academic and having a PhD, you know, him and I talked about it, and he was really excited to for me to have an experience with, you know, lifelong learning as such, as a PhD is. And so that's the path that I took. So that's sort of how I came to be so immersed in the end-of-life space. And I think although I'm employed as a bereavement coordinator and counsellor, and given my PhD in the end-of-life space, I think for me overall, it has become a more vocational approach to living. It's something that happens in my life, my work, my uni, and it's really for me around building capacity, engaging community, and increasing understanding and connection when it comes to death and grief.
And what an amazing, incredible story. And Joanna, you know, this is such deeply personal things that we're talking about, even though it's your history and your background. And thank you so much for so beautifully sharing the different stages, you know, from the Bachelor of Arts and recognizing that, you know, perhaps curation was not the pathway to go down, through to the social work, and recognizing that those deep family values, whether it was from the youth centre or the women's refuge in Tamworth, that you were instilled from a young age with all of those different incredible values about equity and fairness and justice. And then years later, you know, that experience that you had on the aged care ward, and recognising that, I love how you changed the language there to the end of life space, and that your PhD is in there. It's not about the grief, and it's not about the bereavement. It's about the end of life, and then coming to that realisation. And I know with your work with Palliative Care Australia as well, it's about, you know, the vocational approach to living. And living, part of living is understanding the process, etc., around dying and grief and what have you. With such interesting insights into humanity, into people, and people in some of the most difficult times of their life. I'm fascinated. What does success now mean to you? What do you think success sort of drives you in your life?
A really excellent question, and having an opportunity to reflect on that has been really lovely. I think for me, what success is, it's really about finding the thing that you are passionate about, finding the thing that makes you get up and feel inspired every day. Because what happens then is it's not work, right? It doesn't become work. It's something that you're intrinsically driven to get up and do. And whether that's around creating change or whether that's around engaging in those conversations, for me, deeply, it is around finding the thing that you're passionate about, because it makes it so easy.
So what would you say then that you're deeply passionate about? What would you succinctly say? I'm deeply passionate about giving people more tools to live with, or what are your words around your passion?
So I guess for me, there's two aspects to it. And the first one is I'm passionate about having a community that is comfortable, confident, and understands the systems that we live in when it comes to death, and how to navigate those systems and how to support each other during that time, when we're caring, when we're at end of life, when we're grieving. And sitting under that is a community that is connected, a community that cares for each other. And by that, I mean, there's practical aspects to that, but there's also, the tiniest little thing that you can do within your neighborhood, within your community, that could mean the world to someone. I was listening to a podcast the other day. Trent Dalton was talking about a story whereby a person was thinking about ending their own life. And at that point in time, they'd had a measure in their head. If someone walks past me and says hello, I won't do it. And someone walked past and said hello. So for me, the simplest thing we can do is we're out on the dog walk, or we're having a walk, or we're on a run, is just start saying hello to the people in our neighborhood, in our community, because we don't know what's going on for them. We don't know whether we're the only person that has spoken to them that day. So that's really important. And that's essentially what drives what I'm really interested in. And yes, there's this end of life lens that I'm bringing to it. But at the core of that, it's around a connected community. And Hugh Mackay, the amazing social researcher, talks about the state of the nation starts in your street. And he also goes on to talk about things like other social aspects of our society, whereby there's a lot of stress and conflict. Domestic violence is an example. If we had a community that was more compassionate and kind to each other, less inwardly looking and more outwardly focused, then maybe rates around DV wouldn't be as great as well.
What interesting, again, such profound and fabulous ways of looking at success, whether that's about, building the systems for death within the community, or whether within that community, just having even the simplest of intentions within that community to support each other and to be there for each other. And I love that example of, even just saying hello. If somebody says hello, I'm not going to think about suicide for today. If somebody just is a little bit kind, then what an incredible way of defining success for yourself, and defining success as your purpose and as your focus for your life. With all of these quite deep and profound areas that we're talking about today, Joanna, what do you think, there's kind of a scale, obviously, from people that are thinking about, quite deeply troubled with suicide, all the way through to I'm having a bad day at work, or I'm having a bad day with family. But as a social worker and somebody that works with supporting people to create better mental health and wellness in different ways, what are some of the key tips or suggestions that you have for people?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, actually, because there's no one size fits all. But what we know from all of the research and evidence is that if you're socially isolated, it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day on your health. So a socially connected person is going to have a longer life. They're going to be more engaged in their life, and they're going to have a better quality of life and probably quality of death as a result. So one of my tips would be, as hard as it can be, is try and find your people, try and find your tribe. That's extremely important. And I guess there's challenges, many challenges for people, particularly some vulnerable people in our community, in finding their tribe, especially if there's been a trauma history for them. However, I think given the internet, people are able to find forums and avenues of social connection that previously weren't there. I think the other thing that is really important is to, and Australians are really bad at this, is to ask for help. There's some amazing research that was done by a colleague of mine, and the research showed that we're terrible at asking for help and we are terrible at accepting help. So I try to be better at asking for help myself, and I try to offer help and be a helper as much as possible. So they're two things that are really important. We have this cultural challenge around help more broadly, and we need to get better at doing that.
I really love how, and thank you, those are two incredible suggestions for how to create that more successful mindset. And it's interesting, this social connection, because it comes up time and again when I'm asking people about creating a more successful mindset, and whether you're having a good day or a bad day and in a great place or a not as great place. I think that finding your tribe, I love using this example where my name, Michele, has got one L, and I actually set up on Facebook a tribe of women, of people called Michele with one L. And what was fascinating to me was that all of these different people I'd never met, and many of whom I will never meet in my life, but we all had similar stories. We spent a lifetime of explaining to people, it's Michele with one L. You write it with one L, this and that. So
Yeah.
finding your tribe, and I'm using this in a funny example, but a very real example as well, to demonstrate it actually doesn't matter what it is that you pick or you think about. There are going to be people out there on some form of social media that have similar experiences, and it doesn't cost anything. You're not judged, you're not this, you're not that. You can set it up, and then you can find people with similar experiences. And I appreciate you pointing out that, especially here in Australia, but I'm sure in other cultures as well, your second tip about asking for help and then being open to accepting help. I did another fabulous example of this. Got lots of examples today. I was with a group called Insight Seminars, where they had this toothpick exercise. And in that exercise, if you were off track, there was no clapping from the people around you. But if you moved a toothpick and it was the right move towards the solution, they clapped. And it was this concept of the universe and the people around you giving feedback. And I think that asking for help and being open to receive it is one of those things where you taking that action, that small microscopic action as small as moving a toothpick, then initiates the universe, the people around you, whether that's online or in person, being able to help you and give feedback. But Joanna, I'm sure that those are two funny examples I thought of. But do you have examples yourself where, building the tribe or looking for help and asking for help you must have hundreds of examples where either for yourself or people that you've been working with, you've seen this magical power of how incredible it can be in supporting people with creating that mental wellness.
Yeah, there's lots of examples that are coming to mind. I'll give you an example where, so the other night I was leading a death cafe and we were talking about community and building connection in community. And the people who were in the room, there was about 12 of us, we were talking about our relationships with our neighbours and being able to rely on our neighbours and ask for help from our neighbours or offer help to our neighbours. And sadly, there was only 2 of us in the room that had that. However, that made me then reflect on the fact that we were all sat in this room, and although we may not be neighbours, we are still part of the same community, and we're offering support and care to each other, even within that group. So that's one really lovely example of, something just happened the other day. I think, another example is when in my local community, there's been, fairly awful tragedy that's happened. And as a group of mums, we rallied around and organised sort of like a meal schedule, pick up and drop off kids schedule, those sorts of things, shopping being delivered, those sorts of things. And that was received by the family really well. They were very appreciative of that. But after a certain amount of time, they felt like they didn't need it anymore and felt confident enough to say, although we've appreciated it and we're very thankful, we're okay now. And that's really good too. It's really good to be able to have that honest, open conversation with the helpers in your community at a time when you don't feel like you need it either at that point any longer.
And I love those fabulous examples because all too often you're so right. You can be sitting in a group saying, nobody ever does this or this never happens, etc., etc. But if you actually pause and then look around like you did at the Deaf Cafe and went, oh, actually, we're a community, we're a tribe, the people here, and what support can we offer to each other and help each other with, and starting with recognizing what is around you, and that may even just be the people in the elevator in your building or in the just outside of your building in the closest coffee shop where people from near where you live, if you live in a house, the people from there go. And then the second example, which was again very touching, around when you do know that families or people in your area are having a hard time, and being part of, supporting. And I similarly found on Facebook somebody was delivering some goods to a mental health hospital nearby, and they put out, if you have any items, can you, please help with giving items. I would never have, myself gone to this particular hospital and delivered goods, but somebody had a personal experience and a personal reason for wanting to give back in that way. And so supporting them, again, this is where I think Facebook and other social media platforms have changed it now. So as you were saying about being around your tribe, finding the people that you can offer support to and you can ask for support from is really an important part. Yeah. What other sorts of suggestions do you have, Joanna?
I think it's really important to know your strengths and what you kind of bring to your community or your workplace, whatever it might be. But also then know the strengths of others or encourage others to, work on working out what their strengths are. I think that that's really, really important because for me, I'm such a massive team player. And recognise that I can't make change or be motivated enough by myself just to engage community on that level. It takes a team of people to be able to do that, but also a team of people around me to support me to do that as well. So knowing what we all bring to the table, to a partnership, is really important. For me also, a very huge part of who I am is general curiosity. bordering on nosiness, probably where I'm a good little snoopy social worker. I love getting to know about things broadly, but especially that person in front of me. So we all have that sort of story to tell, and by being curious about that person in front of you, you might learn something more broadly, but also something about yourself. We spoke briefly before we started recording, Michele, about imposter syndrome, and I think that that's something that contributes to success as well, in that being okay with sitting in the discomfort of imposter syndrome is really important, you know, because we've all been in meetings, or we've all been in at community events where you think to yourself, oh my gosh, who am I to be speaking at this, or who am I to be, you know, leading this bit of work, when there's, you know, MPs in the room or mayors in the room, whoever's there. So just acknowledging how you're feeling and sitting with that discomfort is really, really important. And I think the most important thing for me, and many people who know me would say this is not a tip for success, or necessarily a strength, but for me it is, because it opens up opportunities, is just say yes. Say yes to whatever is being thrown your way, because you don't know what that will then lead to. You know, and by saying yes, you're kind of enjoying the ride as well. Like a colleague of mine who I admire deeply, again, another mentor, invited me to participate in facilitating a conference in Thailand. And, you know, this was way out of my comfort zone, way out of my depth, but I just said yes. I thought, why not? Let's give it a crack. And it was amazing. And being away with her for the week was invaluable for me, and has led to so many other opportunities coming from that. So that's something that I think is really important, is to just say yes.
I love that so much. And I love that fabulous example you gave there about saying yes, going to the conference and being at that conference, and the offer opportunities that came out of that, because the points that you were raising before that about knowing your strengths and strengths of others, and having that curiosity, and working, sitting with imposter syndrome and working through that, and just being present to all of that, so that when you say yes, you just kind of lean into it and see where that journey takes you. It's been such an interesting journey with you today, Joanna. But what is the best way for people to get hold of you if they want to hear more?
Yeah, thank you, Michele. They can find me on LinkedIn, is probably the easiest. I think there's a really wonderful opportunity to connect professionally, and to talk about community and all things end of life, compassionate communities, Death Cafe. So just kind of flick me a message on LinkedIn.
Fabulous. And one of my favourite questions asking people, especially people like yourself that have, through your work, such a unique perspective on life and death and everything in between. What advice, if any, would you give to your younger self, Jo?
For me, I really struggled with this question. I think that I have an extremely blessed and lucky life, but I think, again, I always come back to human connection and being grounded in relationships and community. So for me, the tip that I would give myself is really being more understanding of the complexities of relationships, and be more forgiving of others and of myself, while navigating those, but also be really brave to have those hard conversations with people that you love, around those challenging things, rather than shying away from them. So that would be the advice I would give to my younger self. But whether I'd listen or not would be a totally other.
I love that. That's so true. Would you listen to yourself? And I love that focus again, and bringing it back to that human connection, the community, which has been a theme so much of what we've been talking about today, and the being more understanding and forgiving of yourself and others. And isn't it interesting that that's things that you learn as you grow and as you experience life. They tend to be things that you become gentler and kinder with yourself, but it's also you somehow, through that aging and growing process, you become braver and have those difficult conversations. But Jo, it's been such an absolute pleasure having you come on the show today.
Great, thank you. It's been so lovely to talk, and what a unique experience for me. So I'm deeply appreciative.
And thank you. You know, the work that you do and how you support others is, you know, such a blessing to everybody in the community and in your many tribes I know that you're a part of.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Michele.
So thank you to everybody watching again today and to all of the continued support from our fabulous viewers. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.